friends, welcome back to Food Prep Guide. I am on my way out to the garden today and I thought it would be fun to do a garden tour. This is something that I have wanted to do for years, is just to kind of keep a visual journal of my garden, but I haven't been super motivated to do it, so I thought maybe by sharing it with you it would help keep me accountable and keep me motivated to get it done. So we are headed out to the garden for our first tour of the season for the month of May. Let's get going. Okay, I just walked through the door, so I'm just going to do like a panorama. Is that what that word is? I'm not sure. Just give you a little glimpse of the garden space that I have here, and then we'll walk through each thing. There's my green stalk right there. Okay, so let's see. As soon as we walk into the garden, we have my first vertical trellis. I have a net down the center just to give me a third row on each one, and we have spaghetti squash here. This is what we use for our spaghetti squash spaghetti. I want to harvest at least 12 really good sized spaghetti squash here to allow us to eat that meal once a month for a year. I do have a random tomato here, 2 tomatoes right here actually. I just had some extra seedlings and didn't have anywhere to put them, so those are here. They are Cherokee Purple, one of my absolute favorites. Anytime I put a tomato, I try to also put a little patch of basil. So that's what that is right there. Same thing on this side, just spaghetti squash. And this hasn't sprouted yet, but in this bare dirt right here, I'm doing a patch of sunflowers. I learned last year, accidentally, that squash bugs absolutely love sunflowers. And if you plant them a few feet away from your squash plants, they can act as a trap crop. They will go to that sunflower, and you can go out in the early evenings with a cup of soapy water and pop those little squash bugs, like hit the back of the sunflower head, and they'll drop right into your soap cup. And that was just a really simple way, natural way that I was able to handle the squash bugs last year. Here we have another cattle panel trellis with another net down the center. This one is tomatoes on the outside ends, and then a row of, what are those? Sugar baby watermelons on those. Sugar babies are so sweet, but they are small. So they trellis beautifully. They're not so heavyweight that they'll snap the vines. You can trellis those and plant them a little bit closer than you normally would be able to. And our family just absolutely loves sugar baby watermelons. Okay, I'm going to flip you over to here. This is I have some square foot beds starting here and then going all the way back there. This first bed right here is golden beets. This is my first year growing beets, and none of our family members like traditional red beets, but I've heard golden beets are not as dirt tasting, not as earthy as regular beets, and I am growing them specifically for a canning recipe that uses vinegar, but it's not like a pickling type recipe. I can't remember what the name of it is, but I'll try to find that and maybe share that with y'all when it comes harvest time. But that's what this is. This is golden beets. Next is our bed of red onions. This is also my first year growing red onions. I've grown onions before, but not red onions. And I'm pretty happy with how they're looking. This is also a square foot bed, and I have about 2 to 3 onions per square foot, and they're looking pretty good. One thing you will notice about my garden is it is not a weed-free garden whatsoever. Weeding is a family affair that typically happens on the weekends, and I just do my best to stay on top of it. I do my best to stay on top of the mulch, but I am not weed-free by any means. Okay, next bed. This is another cherry tomato bed. And I have a patch of parsley here, and once again, anytime I plant tomatoes, I try to do basil. This right here is a perennial garlic chive. If you have never had garlic chives, you are missing out. They are so good. They are just like green onions, but when you bite into them, they taste like garlic. It's awesome. So some more cherry. These are Berry's Crazy Cherry. They're little yellow tomatoes, and they grow 40 to 50 little tomatoes per cluster. And here I have my bunching onion. This is also perennial. Both of these plants are 2 years old, and this one's going to seed, as you can see. That's what these little pods are right here. I'm waiting for them to dry out, and then I will come and harvest. There's this little pod right here. You can see as these dry out, you can open it and you'll see that little black seed in the middle, and that is the seed. That's the bunching onion seed. So I'll be harvesting those, and those will continue to grow. Next, we have our pepper plant. We only like sweet peppers around here, no jalapenos or anything like that, but these are, I have some California Wonders, some Corbaci peppers, and oh, what's that really big one? Marconi Rossi peppers. I'm really excited about those this year. They get really big, and supposedly they grow really well in my climate. This is my first time growing Marconi Rossi peppers. Parsley on both ends, a clump of parsley here and a clump of parsley there. Next is my cabbage bed. This is also planted square foot, 1 cabbage per square foot. I'm also growing a nice healthy patch of weeds right here. But this is an early maturing variety of cabbage. This is, oh, I can't remember that one either. I'll pop that down in the description when I remember what kind it is, but it matures in just 60 days. And as you can see, they're already forming heads pretty nicely. I'm a little nervous because it is the end of May here, and we are already getting temperatures up in the 80s sometimes. And these cabbages really aren't going to be able to handle super hot temperatures, so I'm a little nervous about that, but we'll see what we can do and how much we can get out of them. Next is my kale bed that is busting out of the seams. I need to tuck this net down. This net is to protect against the cabbage moth. Both of these beds have it. It prevents the moth from landing on the leaves, which then prevents them from laying their eggs, which prevents the caterpillar from destroying your crop. This is all the pest control I have to do for these, and it works wonders. Kale is something that I actually don't love the taste. Like, I'm not really a kale person. I'm not obsessed with it, but I am absolutely obsessed with salads, and it's just, in my climate, it's hard to catch that cool window for salad greens. I do still plant my salad greens. I'll show you that in just a minute. But this kale patch will be producing, and it won't get bitter, it won't bolt, it will be here producing well into the summer. So I primarily do this to mix in with my other salad things so I can have a decent salad each day. Now we're just going to cross over some weeds and go to our potato patch. These are mostly Yukon Gold potatoes. These were planted the very end of February. They're actually really close to harvest. They're still looking big, beautiful, and green though, so I'm not going to touch them quite yet, even though the calendar says it's about time. The plants are telling me it is not. They're still vibrant green. When they start to die back, turn brown, go limp, and kind of just not looking good, then it's time to harvest. So I'm just going to wait for those cues before I harvest. If you're interested in how to prepare your potatoes for planting, we have a video on that, and I will link that in the description above. Let's circle over here to my straight tomato panel, or I mean my straight cattle panel. Most of the cattle panels we use, we put them in a hoop shape, but this one we have straight, and these are my Roma tomatoes. I have Roma and I have Amish paste, and these are all for canning. I have marigolds at each end, and then I have basil just sprinkled throughout. It is third week of May, so they are still pretty small. I winter sow, and I start everything from seeds, so I typically start with really small plants, not anything at all like what you get at the store. So it might take a little while for mine to get caught up to what I would do if I had transplanted seedlings instead, but that's okay. Okay, next we have my perennial herb bed. This looks like a disaster zone, but it's delicious disaster zone. This is thyme. We have creeping thyme, we have oregano. This huge patch right here is all oregano. And then this little patch that's starting to flower, that is thyme. And then right here we have sage. And then down here somewhere in this little tiny sprigs, I have some baby rosemary that's still trying to wake up from its winter nap. All those leaves, I laid those down and covered this entire area last December, and everything overwintered. And then when it was springtime, I didn't even move the leaves. Everything that you see here popped up naturally through those leaves. I didn't have to do anything, they just popped up. That's the wonder and beauty of perennial herbs. You plant them once and they will give and give and give. So that is my perennial herb bed. I have some space right here. I tried to reseed some this year. They didn't take, so I'm going to have to try that again, but I think I'm going to put some more rosemary right there. Okay, so let's go to this one row. I only have one 50-foot row in my bed so far this year, but I'll have more in just a minute, which I'll show you in just a second what I mean. But this 50-foot row of onions is sweet, Texas sweet onions. They were planted the 1st of March, and I'm still a little uncertain if I'm going to get a good harvest out of that. I saw one of my plants push out a little seed pod, and if you don't know, whenever onions bolt, they will no longer put energy into bulb growth. So that was only one plant, and I kind of panicked and I picked it off and I'm like, nope, that didn't happen. Let's just pretend it didn't happen, but it did. And if one bolted, then probably all of them will bolt, but I'm not going to call it just yet. So this patch right here, which is just weeds, and that is just weeds, this is going to be from here to here is going to be 3 50-foot rows of sweet potatoes. Those will go in about 2 weeks, so we're just not ready for that yet. And we're not mowing it because the bees absolutely love the white clover. Let me hear. This white clover, the bees just absolutely love the white clover. So they are loving this patch right here, and that's why I'm not mowing it down just yet. Okay, right over here is my container garden. This is a little different this year. So in years past, I have had my container garden on the opposite side of my house. And that is that's because I only plant squash in here, squash and zucchini. And because of the squash bugs and the squash vine borers, because of how invasive they are, I don't want to invite those into my main garden space. And so I've always had those on the opposite side of my house. Unfortunately, we now have free-ranging chickens and multiple cats, and they like to use them as litter boxes, both of them. The chickens like to use it as a little nesting box, and the cats like to use it as litter box. And there's just no way around it. We tried several things, all sorts of pokies and barriers and scents, and just nothing worked. So they're gonna have to be inside my main garden, and that's okay. I have a plan. Let me talk to you about that plan. So everything you see here is going to be squash, yellow crooked neck squash. And over here I have one. Let me try to give you an idea of the distance. Okay, so here's this, and here's the rest of the container. So it's about 10 feet from there. And in this pot right here is going to be Blue Hubbard squash. Blue Hubbard squash is an excellent trap crop for squash bugs, and as I mentioned earlier, sunflowers are too. So right over here, so I've got the containers of squash right here, and then right here, I'm late on my sunflowers. These should already be up, but I just did not get to it, unfortunately. But all of this is going to be just a little patch of sunflowers, and that will be my pest control for squash bugs, at least for now. We'll see how it goes. Okay, let's move to the new tomato bed this year. So every year I try to expand my garden, and this year I realized I need lots more tomatoes. One thing that I learned when I switched to a garden staple, or a staples garden of primarily growing crops for preservation, is that you don't get near as much as you think you get out of each plant. And if you want enough to can and dehydrate, preserve for any length of time, you need, like, at least in my case, I needed 3 to 4 times as much as I had. So for us, that meant a new tomato bed this year. So we are growing. We already mentioned the Cherokee Purple. We have the Amish Paste and the Romas on the cattle panel trellis. Over here we have the Better Boy variety. Once again, I have basil plopped in between these. And then here we have, oh, what are these? I can't remember. I know I have Bradley. This row right here is Bradley tomatoes, which I'm really excited about this year. They're supposed to be acclimated to our very hot and humid summers, so I'm excited about those. I got a little nasturtium plant right here that's doing good. It's going to eventually grow up and run across this fence right here. And then I've got marigolds on kind of the end caps on each of my tomato rows. If you notice, I have some tomato plants that are way smaller than others. Like this one is itty bitty, whereas these are bigger. And that's because some of my tomato plants got eaten by slugs within 2 days of transplanting. So I had extras. So anytime that happened, I just plopped a new one down in the ground, got a fresh start. And then I used Sluggo for slugs, and I use ground cinnamon. I'm trying ground cinnamon this year for aphids and stuff like that. Okay, let me try to give you a good view of our 2 tunnels here. There we go. Okay, we have 2 tunnels here. And this tunnel, those big leafies, those are zucchini rampicante. And then right up here at the top is rattlesnake pole beans. I've got them, I plant on each side of my trellises. I know some people only plant one. That's just a personal preference. I like to go ahead and plant both. And then in this cinder block bed here is jade bush green beans, 1 row, and then the other row is contender bush beans. I'm testing both varieties this year side by side, see how they do in my hot and humid climates. After I harvest these green beans, it'll be end of summer, and this bed is going to be garlic. Both beds actually are going to be garlic. And this next tunnel, I have cucumbers all on this back row over here. I have some pickling cucumbers, National Pickling, Boston Pickling, and then that back trellis that have not sprouted are my muncher cucumbers. And we have a video on what I did to make those seeds sprout, even though they were old, and I was able to get almost 100% germination rate. I'll link that above. You can check that out in case you have any old seeds that don't seem to be sprouting for you. There's a little trick you can do to get them to sprout. So both sides again are cucumbers, and then on this trellis, same thing again, rattlesnake pole beans. I got 2 trellises of those. I'm really hoping to put up at least 24 quarts of green beans this year. That's my goal, but we'll see. And here is carrots. I'm growing 4 different varieties of carrots this year, again side by side, just like the green beans, because I'm trying to figure out which one is going to be best for my growing environment. You can see this empty patch right here, and I noticed early on when I was watering, this patch right here was holding water big time. Like I would only be watering for maybe 10 seconds and it would already be flooded in that area. And I think what happened was I did not mix the soil good enough right here, and it is too concentrated with peat moss. Peat moss retains moisture, and I think what I did is I just did not mix it in. So that shows you how important it is to really mix everything evenly, because look at that big bald spot right there. Totally missed opportunity for some yummy carrots because I didn't mix it good. But lesson learned. I'll know that moving forward and do better next year. Let's see, I talked to you about the sweet potatoes. I think that is about it. I have some medicinal herbs, but that's in a different location. So we'll maybe talk to you about that some other day. We do have some elderberry trees and some loquat trees from Florida, but those I'm still trying to figure out if those are going to survive that big freeze we had recently. I did forget to show you our grapevines. So we have grapevines here, and they have already hopped the fence and hopped onto my spaghetti squash trellis, so hopefully those 2 can coexist and that won't be too much of an issue, but we'll have to see about that. And that wraps up this garden tour for May. Thank y'all for joining, and we'll be back in June to show you the progress of the garden. See y'all next time. Bye.